They say everything in life is created twice. First in our mind, and then in reality. And I'm excited to bring with you here a growth strategist, Simon Lewis. How are you, Simon?
Good morning. Nice to meet you.
Same here, buddy. Simon has worked in advising the president of Emirates Group and Danata on change and strategy between quite a significant period of time.
Yeah, 11 years almost. Yeah.
11 years. And today we're here to just share some of the main ideas that have taken such a giant into where it is today. But more excitingly, is can these principles be applied to your businesses? So we're going to discover this together.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Okay. Simon, again, I said everything is created twice, first in someone's mind, then in reality. What are the elements of creating the future? What do we call that?
Wow. Okay. I mean, I think in business it comes down to having a very clear vision of where you want to go and what you want to achieve. And then that's supported by a mission, which really focuses where people are going to activate their contribution to achieve that vision. And then obviously a set of values, which brings all those people together to work harmoniously, one hopes, but certainly develop a culture within the business that is and should be customer-centric to the needs of their customers as well.
You know, what you said is music to my ears. And one of the things I'll mention here, you know what, Simon, I've been in many organizations where I walk into their offices and I can see a vision and mission and values, but it's not actually making things happen. You know, it's not enough to just have it. How do we actually activate that further so that it's rooted within the organization?
So there's two areas to focus on, I would suggest. One is on the leadership, and then it's also on the people. All too often I've seen good, solid statements being written for a vision, mission and values, and there's a little bit of hype behind it, everybody gets pumped, and then sort of after the opening ceremony, it all suddenly goes flat and loses momentum.
Absolutely.
Let's focus on the leadership first. So on the leadership, they've got to be behind them. They've got to be behind the vision, mission and values. If they're not, you've got a weak link in the chain. And it doesn't mean that that person needs to move on, but perhaps that person needs to be refocused on what the direction of the company's going in, and indeed where their contribution is going to make a difference.
Can you elaborate a bit more on that leadership? So if the leader is not fully in tune with the mission and vision, and you know, a lot of the work I do is with sales leaders, right? And of course you have the mission vision to be the number one XYZ type of company of our kind in this part of the world, or to be the go-to. But then the leaders are, in a way, forget about that mission and vision, and more importantly, the values, and they just focus on results. So now they become, sorry to say this, but they're just looking at the numbers, not the people that are making the numbers come to life.
Yeah.
Anything you can elaborate for us on that?
What I find interesting is, I study leadership models, and the latest ones are transformational, authentic leadership, all of those types of things. Ultimately, they always return back to three key words that I was introduced to when I sort of took my first official class in leadership, if you wish, which is at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. And those three words are serve to lead. And I think all too often today, as leaders go up the organisation, they often forget about the importance of serving to lead the people that they are responsible for. And they do get focused on the numbers, which is natural because they're under a lot of pressure. Yet, if they actually get the people around them and talk about the issues, talk about the challenges, and listen to what those people are saying, often they're coming straight from the front line. And it's like anything in a military operation. If you've got the up-to-date information of what's happening on the front line, you're better equipped to make decisions. So likewise, in business, if you're getting data and information from the front line, one, those people feel empowered. That they're
Feel listened to, feel important, that
Exactly.
contributing, yes.
And when they see that contribution actually being turned into action, then it actually becomes more powerful. But suffice to say that often leaders tend to operate at a senior level, who tend to operate at a senior level, because they've been there and they've done that, got the T-shirt if you wish, listening to the front line perhaps isn't foremost on their agenda. And it's perhaps listening to the pressure of the shareholder, listening to the pressure of the market. And of course, Newton's law of physics, to every action there's an opposite reaction. If you go down as a leader and you start sort of chastising your people for not working hard enough, for not getting the sales in, how are they going to respond? Well, they're going to most probably forget about the values and go hell for leather to get the sales in. Ultimately, that actually might get the sales in, but at what damage? What collateral? Well, you might have lost some customers along the way, because whilst you made that sale today, they might not come back tomorrow.
Absolutely. You got the what and how. What is, can you get the sales? The how is are these behaviors. Are we being customer centric? Are we listening to customer needs? Are we aware of their existing need, but how about their future needs, which then can be fed back into the organization to make corrective actions and bring new products, bring new ideas, all with the same objective, to be number one. So it's not about being number one today and that's it. Number one is like is a moving target. You might be number one today, but doesn't mean you're going to wake up and be number one tomorrow. And that's what many leaders need to remember. You mentioned something about how the entire journey started for you. So can you go back in time and tell us a little bit about this lead to serve? So how did the
Serve to lead, yeah.
Serve to lead, yeah.
Yeah. So look, I started my professional career in the military. At the age of 18, I went to the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. And I sort of remember on the very first day, there was about 90 of us that made a company, a rifle company effectively. And we were ushered into this beautiful oak-panelled room with wonderful pictures of the military up there and that sort of stuff. And we're all in our civilians, some in suits, some in sports jackets, ties. And in walked the company commander, a major, and we all stood up. Now, as we entered that room, we got given a little red book, which is about the size of your notebook there, A5 size. And on it was the crest of Sandhurst, and below it the words "Serve to Lead," written in silver, embossed in silver. And the company commander, the major from the Gurkhas, sort of stood up and said, "Gentlemen, congratulations on getting to Sandhurst. You're in the top 10 percentile of the recruitment pool now." Now, this was back in the 80s. And please do not think that you've passed this course.
Interesting.
You've actually just started your learning. And to help you, and when you find times difficult, you've got a book that you've been issued with. You don't have to give it back, it's yours for life. And in it are anecdotes of leaders and of people who have been led, not always in the military, in civilian life as well, passing their comments and ideas and beliefs on. Use it wisely. And I still have that book today. I still refer to it because it is about putting others before yourself in order that you can lead.
Can you, thank you so much for sharing. It's very, very, very inspiring. And, is there any one particular quote that helped you in bring about this, serve to lead, or lead to serve? Sorry,
serve to lead.
Thank you. Servant leadership. Okay, serve to lead. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, there's one which actually is a JFK quote from 1962, which is the Cuban crisis, and he said, there are risks and problems to every process of action, but they are far less than the challenges of comfortable inaction. Something like that. In other words, that if you're going to do something, there will be risks and problems. But if you don't do something, they're going to be far greater consequences. And therefore, as when in a position of being a leader, you've got to make that decision. You've got to go for it. But in the process, how you've reached that decision is crucial. And I think that in conversations I've had with many people who've asked me about the military experience, there's a strong belief that it's very autocratic, and whatever the command is, you follow. Mm-hmm. Nothing could be further from the truth. And I was most probably in the most challenging of leadership roles in the infantry, where you're dealing with and looking after the lives of 30 men. And whenever you got an operation, yes, you'd go away and you'd figure out how you're going to do it. But before you delivered it to your men, you'd get your corporals and sergeants around and you'd say, this is how I see it. Now, have I missed anything? Is there anywhere where we can improve upon it? Or are you all comfortable and we can get in front of them and
make it happen?
And of course, invariably they come back, boss, you need to think about this, you need to think about that. Got that, or no, I disagree because I think this is more important at the stage. If you're comfortable with that, let's crack on. If you're not, we're still going to crack on. But I've got the agility to change if you see it happening. And away you go. And one of the last year was the 40th year of the Falklands War, which was a unique event in British military history. And one of the real learning points that came out from that was that when, in the infantry, the guys got stuck in, the leaders, the platoon commanders, actually had little effect. It was down to the corporals and the lance corporals on the ground, directing and following through. And the same applies in business. And whilst you can get somebody with a powerful business title, ultimately it's those people on the ground that are doing the sales, that are getting the monies in and getting the job done. So how do you, as a leader, get with those people? Well, you've got to get down to the front line. You've got to be with them at some stage. And my boss in Donata, he was remarkably good at having a walk around. Once a week, he would just walk around the offices. Didn't have to.
So who's that boss?
That was a chap called Gary Chapman.
Okay.
And
so that's the big...
he was president of Emirates Group Services in Donata.
So just going down, talking with the troops and just seeing what's going on.
Yeah, just asking. Always approachable. And one of the things I always remember when we kicked off the One Donata program, which was a transformation program for Donata, I called him up and said, Gary, would you be willing to have a breakfast with 10 or 12 people from across the Donata business and group services and just shoot the breeze, just talk about anything? And obviously if you can't talk about it, you can say, or if it's too confidential, you can say, but talk about it. And he said, love to.
Amazing. And
then every month thereafter, we got 12 people in who could fire questions at Gary about the business, about his life, about where he wants, where he sees Donata going. And to qualify to get on that, you actually had to demonstrate how you were using the Donata values in your place of work. Real simple, but very effective.
Quite inspiring. Just the openness of Gary jumping onto that opportunity, and I can imagine the type of bond that now he's having with multitudes of different people within the organization, connecting with the leader of that organization. Basically, he's having his pulse, his finger on the pulse. The people, what are they? What's going on? But also that level of, I would say, two-way communication between the people and that leader of that organization. So let me ask you a question. A lot of time, leaders get stuck in their own ways. So this is maybe not. It's a little bit uncomfortable. I'm too busy for these things. What do you say to that?
Wow, I think one of the key aspects of an effective leader is that they're always willing to learn. And you look at the way the generations are changing from X and Y to the current
Z, or I think,
Z,
or
yeah.
which.
And here we are, tender age, not fully. No, we are on top of it, but it gets back down to, I think, what you value. Mm-hmm. We've all had friends who've had, challenges in their marriage and that sort of thing. And the friends I've spoken to, I've always said, return to the values that you first got married on. Now, if they've gone, then fair enough. But if they're still there, then there's a glimmer of hope that you can return to those and work through the problem. And I think the same applies for a leader in business. If the leader understands what he or she values, and they're still aligned with the business, but perhaps they're not being employed as often, then it's that person's responsibility to take a step back. That's where the challenge is, because sometimes it's difficult, and that's where a friend, a coach, somebody can actually sort of say, well, have a look at this. Have you considered? And just like a good sports coach, it's not about changing everything. It's about changing a couple of parts of how they go about things to be really effective, and suddenly things will actually progress a lot better. I find it interesting that often leaders don't delegate enough. Thinking it's important for them to be in the center of everything.
So what does that do for the business, for the people, for the culture?
Well, I mean,
for the development or lack of it, for that for that matter.
One, obviously, there's an unconscious sense that there's a lack of trust, because if somebody doesn't delegate, they're indicating that perhaps they don't trust people. Two, for the people who can see what needs to be done but are not being asked to get it done, there develops a lack of motivation and a frustration with the setup. And invariably, people can only tolerate that for so long before they give up the ghost and say, right, I'm off. And that's where your retention problems come in. And in that process, of course, when you start to lose talent from the business, so your culture gets diluted. The vision and mission and the execution of that gets diluted, because you've got to bring new people in, and they're going to take 3 to 6 months to
figure it out, to kind of go with the flow,
to warm up and do all of that sort of thing. So, it is about the leader being able to serve others in order to be effective. How can he or she serve others? Well, delegation is one area, and actually, delegation and empowerment go hand in hand. And so, if as a leader I've got a task, and I'm absolutely genuine, am I the best person that can complete that task? Not always.
That's right.
But there is somebody that I do trust, somebody that I'd love to see perform that. So I'm going to give that to that person. And look, if they go off track a bit, I'm here to help them. I'm here to keep it on track. And look, that's what Gary did for me. He actually sort of said, look, Simon, come and set up and run One Donata. Implement the One Donata transformation. And that was getting around all the business leaders and making sure it was all done. But if I was ever going off track, he would call me in and say, let's get back on track. Or I want you to do this, which was his way of saying, you need to go and do more of that. And that was a real effective leadership style. But it certainly grew my awareness and capabilities in certain areas. And likewise, if leaders are having a challenge in one part of their business or one part of their area of responsibility, it may actually be the opportunity for somebody under their leadership to grow and bring them in under their wing, and problem halved, problem shared, and you can grow the business from there and themselves.
Absolutely. That to me, this is it's all in the concept of delegate, not abdicate. So delegation is an opportunity to grow others, to develop others. Is an opportunity to actually help people discover their true strengths. And I think you said something where if somebody sees what needs to be done, and no one is doing it. No one is even asking them to do something. Then at the end, they're like, well, why even bring it up? One of the lessons I learned at a very young age, I was in a meeting. I had my key staff around me, and I would go around, asking my corporals and sergeants, what do you think? What do you think? Then I got to one person, and his name is Cristobal Perez. I love the guy. He's a very good friend, and he said to me something that I never forget at age 26 that changed my leadership style. He said, Ramez, what does it matter what I think if at the end you're going to do what's in your mind?
Fair one.
Very, very, very powerful statement to make me realize, so when I give people a chance to talk, am I really listening? And there's a very thin line there between you letting someone talk, but then actually people seeing that you're taking their ideas and implementing them, because as you said, they are the troops on the ground. They can see what's going on. And unless I took their information or their insights, as a leader, I can end up making the wrong decisions.
And to really close that loop,
yeah,
the leader should go back and thank that person.
Oh, amazing.
And that often doesn't happen.
So I can't tell you the number of times I've thanked Cristobal, and if he's listening to us right now, Cristobal, that one time you confronted me, I'm very thankful. That took a lot of courage and a lot of trust, knowing if there was no trust between me and you would have never spoke these words. And it was that trust that maybe the leader instills within his people. I'm approachable, I want to listen, I care, and you know what? When things are busy, I could have some blinders. So I realized at the time I wasn't a great listener, and thank you. I'm forever thankful for that, because that has always come back to serve me, not just in my business world, but also in my family world. So having built that trust with Cristobal goes back to something that I did naturally, which you then brought to me an analogy from the military. Tell me a bit more about this thing called is it a black book?
Yeah.
So we had red and we have black. Let's see if we come up with more colors.
So one of the things that was instilled in your training at Sandhurst was that you need to understand your men.
You need to understand your men.
Yeah. And what that meant was that you kept notes, positive notes, not negative notes, positive notes. Things like where they're from. Have they got brothers and sisters? Are they the oldest? Are they the youngest? What does mum and dad do? Where do they live? To sports and hobbies and interests and things like that. And the whole point of that was that when the soldier was having a morale issue, or they've got a problem at home, you had a point of reference to perhaps open up the gates and let that soldier speak in a little bit more confidence, and be more transparent. And of course, in that process, when the soldier saw you being empathetic by actually sort of saying, how are your mum and dad? Because they live quite away from where we're based, and I'm just wondering if they're affecting your concerns about anything. Or you talked about a hobby or sport, it would break the ice and actually open that person up. It's not a difficult thing to do now, with GDPR and
all these walls that we're putting about information.
That often becomes a challenge in today's leadership. However, to be effective and without going into personal lives too much, I still believe that you can open up by saying sort of, how's the family? Are they all okay? Have you actually got any concerns about the job?
And to whatever extent, just that question opens up the individual, and they will share information.
Yeah.
They will tell you about maybe mom, dad, brother, sister, any personal scenarios, situations, goals, aspirations. I think so here we're going back in the military, let's say, environment. So even in a war, This is important. Now, we are in business. It's a business war, if you were to call it that way. And isn't performance affected by how a person feels?
Yeah, and look, I mean, I find it fascinating because, you know, I've seen organisations, you know, here are our competencies, and your performance is going to be measured on those. How often do you actually see the corporate values being reviewed in a performance review?
That's a good one.
Now, if you have corporate values and you set objectives, be them commercial or not, around those corporate values, what's that going to do to the business?
I think the strongest competencies are those evolving around, you know, that bring out values element into them. The competency is a behavior, and a behavior can easily be reflected on. We want to work, you know, where you would say care about others. Well, care about others can be customer centricity, for example. And is this showing up?
Yeah, and look, I mean, it's a simple step to actually say, well, I've got my vision, I've got my mission, and I've got my values. Now, if I'm actually going to make sure those values are lived on a day-to-day basis in the workplace, it's not about just describing the behavior and saying, this is what I'm expecting. It's actually, well, let's actually associate that behavior with a particular activity. So if I'm going to do that, why don't I go that one step further and make that an objective? Now, if I've achieved that objective, how would I enhance that objective? Well, what, you know, you've got customer centricity, great. What's a really advanced stage of customer
Centricity.
Yeah. What does that look like compared to the basic? And I'm sure you'll be able to answer.
I thought that was a question, but I think it's a rhetorical question.
No, I'm going to ask you.
Today, different levels of customer centricity. So today, you know, is what you're offering something that is a Me Too service. In other words, we are expected to pick up the phone or answer the phone when you call for a customer service department. Yet, is the interaction internally going to be as friction free? In other words, a lot of time the call center will have their hands tied because they can't make certain decisions. And if I reflect on my experience maybe working with Emirates, I can go back to see how flexible the operators or these agents are, how autonomous things are, where they're able to go and maybe maneuver around the system, which gives me the user an experience that I'm not basically in a wall, but I'm actually being talked to or talked with as a human being. So we go back to that question: is what you're offering a Me Too service or a Me Too support, or are you really thinking 2 steps ahead and giving the customer that wow experience, that wow factor, or that even unexpected factor to that extent?
And you know, when that customer service goes wrong, you know, the business should be confident enough to have the values, its mission and vision played back to them.
Right.
And if people are not willing to accept that, having it supposedly incorporated and employed it, then where's the problem?
Therefore, maybe the values are not being lived appropriately.
And you know, how do you get those? Well, that's probably going back to the leadership to actually sort of say, well, what are the leaders doing to ensure that the values are being lived? Right. And are they actually setting a standard and serving their people with the values to the extent that people understand, yeah, that person does employ that value well, therefore I will follow likewise.
So there is a topic that I want to bring up here to you, Simon, where today people want to be customer centric, they want to be number one, and they in a way ignore their number one resources, and that's their people. So from one side there is a war on talent, and a war on talent is everyone is looking for these qualified individuals. And on the other side, organizations have this external goal, but their people aren't being taken care of the right way. From a salary, from a remuneration, incentives, and things like that. So I remember one of the things that I used to do when I was in the direct sales business, and this has been part of my values, is, you know, what's best for the individual? How can I make the individual comfortable so that they can go out and perform? And that question is it surprises me. So, for example, let's say somebody, this is something I've had with one of my other partners, Dr. Eli Daher, we were talking about, let's say that a sales professional is bringing in a million dirham worth of a, monthly sales. Okay. If you pay them 20% more than what they're currently paid, what will that do for their personal motivation, inspiration, perspiration? Will they be able to, and plus, will that make them stop looking left and right towards focusing more internally? And the answer is yes. And if someone is getting paid maybe more in line with what the market is getting paid, so can they bring better results? So let's just say they bring 20% more results, right? At a certain margin. Let's say I pay someone from 10,000, pay them 12,000. So that's 20. And they go from a million to 1.2 at a 25% margin on some products and services. What's 25% of an extra 200,000? That's 50,000. My investment for that was just spending 2,000 more. So if you look at the ROI, is quite interesting. Any comments on that?
It's a real I think in the sales world where you've got definitive results, the process becomes a lot clearer.
Yeah.
It's performance based. But when you're dealing with support elements like a finance team or an HR team, those sort of elements, how do you ensure that they get a fair pay rise when you've got the added complexity now of people preferring to work at home or having a mixed environment? And then you've got the cost of obviously maintaining an office, which is only 50% full because people are deciding to work at home. Therefore, the retention strategy is, well, if I can keep them, they keep productivity going, but it's still costing me. So their salaries, I can't decrease their salaries to offset so you can see all these sort of complications. That's just one example.
This is recent complications and continuous complications. They're going to be here for a while.
So I think at the end of the day, it goes back to, and this is something I've always been sort of passionate. I get the need for qualifications because that proves that you can deliver, you can learn, and you can concentrate on organising yourself to create an output, be it academically or on the ground. But also there's one about attitude. And I think sometimes attitude is not taken into account when we're looking at people's performances. So let me go back to the salesman that you've just described. 50,000 for 2,000 more, he's generating 50,000. But that individual is leaving carnage in your sales team. And he's not offsiding everybody.
Right.
Do you still want to employ?
Probably not.
But he's just brought you an increase in...
So I think that's where values go back and play. That's where you realize, is the way that the person is bringing this increment in line with the way we want to be seen? Is he...
So it goes back to then sort of saying, okay, if I can't sort of necessarily measure you by the amount of output that's actually having an impact, but I can measure you by your employment of the values, and you can give me clear examples of where you have employed that value and created a positive outcome. Why should I not give you a pay rise on that?
Correct.
Just a thought.
I had once an HR professional ask me, Ramez, have you ever had someone that displays the values, but then they don't get results? And I was like, that's impossible, because if you display the how, you're going to get the what. And it's only a matter of time until this actually starts happening. So I'd say being clear on the behavior that, on these values and the behaviors that are linked to these values is only a way of actually prescribing your own recipe for success.
Agreed. Yeah.
Absolutely. So this has been some fantastic insights for our audiences today. And maybe to kind of top it off with just one last thing. One last thing. So of course, setting a direction, we talk about where is north. Where is north? So you have people that have the right values, the right behaviors, but where are they going with that? So what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, look, I think, they often refer to it as your North Star, which is, anybody who's into navigation, that's the one point in the sky which doesn't change. If you follow that, you're going to be going north. So when you actually look at your business strategy, and I had a real interesting discussion the other day with a group of people who were saying, well, what's the difference between an agile growth strategy and a standard business strategy? Because both should bring growth. And I said, yeah, but with an agile business strategy, let's start with a standard business strategy. Often they're protracted goals over 3 to 5 years. And everybody's working to those goals. Whereas an agile business strategy actually will take those goals down and chunk them down into smaller elements and distribute them around the people. And guess what? You've obviously got more involvement. You actually get more innovation and creativity because people are involved saying, yeah, I know we've got to do that. How about if we go this way instead of that way? And of course that brings growth. And I think in today's business, if you actually don't start thinking agile, it's going to be a virus that if you don't catch, you're not going to survive. I think you've got to think that. And look, here's a challenge which I'll offer people. You no doubt have a business strategy. And
well, I'm not sure about this, no doubt. Okay, but let's just assume people have that strategy.
And in that strategy, they've got growth.
Yeah.
And that growth might be financially, it might be territorially, market-wise, it might be with their operations, it might be enhancing their people's capabilities, whatever it might be, you're going to have growth. Right. So my challenge is, if you've got that growth, does your organization remain as is? Or is it going to be agile in getting that growth? So the question, a simple analogy is, an oil tanker takes 5 miles to turn when it's fully laden.
5 miles.
5 miles, it'll take 5 miles to turn. Yeah. When you go to the other extreme of a speedboat, which can almost turn on a dime. Now, somewhere in between is most probably an effective business. So the question is, how agile is your business to cope with the inevitable changes that are going to happen, be it with technology, customer needs, economic climate? Have you actually built in agility? Or are you sticking to those long-term goals and come what may, we're going to hit them? Touch of the First World War stuff. Just go and take territory. Don't care how many people it takes. Just go and take territory. And sometimes it's 100 meters for thousands of lives. So same in business.
So to kind of wrap things up, I think this is a really great question. Today, change is happening at rapid rates, and today we got our dear friend ChatGPT, where you can ask ChatGPT almost anything and can give you very live, interesting insights. And
only from 2022, though.
Yeah.
Not current.
Only from 2022. Interesting.
Backwards.
So it's actually learning from what has happened before. So of course there are some tools that can help source information and help, let's say, answer questions. But what questions are you going to answer about the current status of your business? And what are you going to put in place in order to take the business from where it is today to where it needs to be? And are you going to have the right people, the right processes, the right technology, the right tools, and the right way, the right behaviors to actually get you there? Because the only one responsible for your success is you. And the way you lead, the way you manage, the way you set vision, mission, structure, and values and live by those values on a day-to-day basis is going to determine that ultimate destination you take your people with you.
Agreed.
So until next time, sell more, sell faster, and profitably.